At exactly 0317 hour 2026, the calm that had settled over the southern mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, a fragile, oil-slick silence broken only by the rhythmic thrum of ship engines, was obliterated in a single catastrophic second. The guided missile destroyer USS Fitzgerald, leading a 3-vessel commercial convoy escort through the 3-4 nautical mile wide choke point, picked up a blinding flash on its AN SPY-6-4 radar. Contact, classification, MILARM, sea skimming, bearing 047, speed, Mach 0.85, distance, 18 nautical miles, time to impact, 74 seconds. Before the tactical action officer could complete her report, a second contact appeared, then a third, then 6 more. 8 IRGC Qader anti-ship cruise missiles, Iran's domestically produced 200-kilometer range sea skimmer, were boring through the black, wave-shredded air of the Hormuz Strait at deck-level altitude 3 meters above the whitecaps, invisible to standard horizon search radar until it was almost too late. Almost. This was not a random salvo. This was the opening move of the most sophisticated naval ambush the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had ever attempted to trap, 11 days in the making, laid with the methodical patience of a chess player who believed he had already won. He was catastrophically wrong, and the next 19 minutes would prove it in the most crushing way imaginable. To understand what was unfolding in the pre-dawn darkness of the Hormuz Strait, you have to rewind to the moment the war began. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated airstrike campaign aimed at dismantling Iran's nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile arsenal, and IRGC command hierarchy. The supreme leader was killed in the opening salvo. Within 72 hours, Iran's military doctrine pivoted from conventional retaliation, which was being systematically destroyed from the air, to asymmetric maritime warfare. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil supply passes every single day, became the IRGC's last viable battlefield. Iran's strategy was brutal in its simplicity: deny the strait, lay hundreds of mines, attack commercial shipping, force global insurance rates into the stratosphere, cripple tanker traffic, drive oil to $200 a barrel, and use the economic catastrophe to fracture the international coalition supporting the U.S.-Israeli operation. By March 5th, CNN had confirmed that Iran had laid dozens of moored contact mines and pressure-activated bottom mines across the eastern approaches to the strait. U.S. Naval Forces Central Command immediately designated the area a hazardous exclusion zone and began dispatching MCM mine countermeasures vessels. Simultaneously, CENTCOM ordered the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, operating 180 nautical miles southeast in the Gulf of Oman, to provide armed escort for critical LNG and crude oil tankers attempting to transit. And the IRGC had been watching, waiting, counting the ships, mapping the escort patterns. Because buried inside this tactical picture was something the Iranian naval planners had not shared with anyone outside their innermost circle. The mines were a lure. The real weapon had not been deployed yet. What you would do in this situation? Could the U.S. Navy survive an 8-missile saturation strike in a confined waterway with no room to maneuver? Comment 1 below if you think America holds the line. At 318 to 4 hours, the USS Fitzgerald's Aegis Baseline 10 combat system responded with an autonomy it had been programmed to exercise in exactly this scenario. The SPY-6 radar, operating in its track-while scan mode, had already resolved each of the 8 incoming Qaders as unique tracks despite the sea surface clutter. The system's correlation of radar tracks algorithm had filtered out 23 ghost contacts created by Iranian shore-based jamming infrastructure on Qeshm Island. The CIC watch officer barely had time to announce vampires, 8 inbound, classify, hostile, before the first standard missile, 6 canistered in VLS Cell 14, ignited and screamed skyward at Mach 3.5. Simultaneously, the Fitzgerald's commanding officer pushed the ship's 4 gas turbines to emergency flank, 32 knots, bow slamming into the swells as the warship accelerated to create a harder angular intercept geometry for the incoming missiles. On the port quarter, the MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, assigned to the convoy, immediately climbed to 8,000 feet and activated its AN/APS-153 multimode radar, flooding the tactical picture with precise low-altitude track data that the surface ship's radar was struggling to resolve due to radar horizon clutter. At the same time, 12 nautical miles to the east, the two commercial tankers under escort, the Hellenic Star and the Euronav VLCC Triton, executed the pre-coordinated immediate danger maneuver. Hard turns away from the threat axis, pushing maximum speed to create separation from the Fitzgerald as the warship became the battle's center of gravity. 4 SM-6 missiles raced southward in the first engagement sequence. 3 Qaders detonated in brilliant fireballs between 8 and 4 nautical miles out. The fourth maneuvering in its terminal phase with a pop-up trajectory to defeat the CIWS engagement envelope was caught at 1,600 meters by the Fitzgerald's Phalanx Block 1B, which vomited 20 millimeters rounds at 4,500 per minute and shredded the warhead before it could arm. 3 seconds later, the expanding cloud of jet fuel, titanium shrapnel, and burning composite material rained across the Fitzgerald's forward deck. No penetration, no casualties. But the fight had barely started. At 318 to 47, SIGINT platforms aboard a P-8A Poseidon Flying Combat Air Patrol at 22,000 feet above the Gulf of Oman detected something that froze every officer in the USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Direction Center. The AN/ALQ-240 Electronic Support Measure Suite picked up an S-band fire control radar emission from a submerged contact bearing 163 degrees, range 22 nautical miles from the Fitzgerald. Classification: Iranian YONO-class submarine. Hull profile acoustic match: YONO-class midget submarine, a vessel 29 meters long, displacing 130 tons submerged, virtually invisible to passive sonar at speeds below 4 knots, armed with 4 heavyweight torpedoes and a crew of 8 fanatical IRGC submariners who had been lying in wait on the bottom of the strait for 61 hours. This was the trap inside the trap. The missile salvo had not been designed to sink the Fitzgerald. It had been designed to force the destroyer to accelerate, to generate a massive acoustic signature detectable by the lurking submarine's passive sonar, to reveal the exact position of every escort vessel in the convoy, and to fix the U.S. Navy's electronic eyes on the surface engagement while the killing blow came from 40 meters below the waves. In the Fitzgerald's Combat Information Center, a dead silence fell for exactly 1.4 seconds. Then, the commanding officer's voice cut through the static. Immediate ASW posture. Launch lamps. Get me a firing solution on that contact. Now. At the same time, exactly as the IRGC's commander had calculated, 3 fast inshore attack craft launched from the eastern shoreline of the strait near Manab, each carrying a 500-kilogram explosive-laden RHIB drone. These were the third layer of the ambush. While the Fitzgerald dealt with missiles from the south and a submarine from the southwest, these surface drones would bore straight up the middle, targeting the tankers themselves. The IRGC had decided that if they could not sink the warship, they would force it to watch helplessly as $400 million in commercial cargo and 47 Filipino and Greek sailors burned. The trap was perfectly set. The execution was precise. The timing was flawless. The Americans had been watching every layer of it build for 72 hours. Do you believe the IRGC had any chance of breaking through the U.S. Navy's layered defense in a confined waterway? Comment your analysis below.